when you do step back, of which I've stepped back now for the last 3 or 4 years, watching from afar from a supervisory board role, you start to understand how vitally important it really is that the business can succeed you and it can actually grow its own legs.
You're listening to 15-Minute Mastery, a show that empowers you with insights from leading iGaming experts to enhance your personal or business performance. The show is brought to you by the AI-powered data analytics platform Blask and supported by tech-driven affiliate and media company Already Media, Lala Stars, the leading casino partnership program, and Next.io, the world's iGaming community. Hey everyone, and welcome to 15-Minute Mastery. Today, we're exploring the critical transition from startup to corporate entity in the iGaming industry. I'm thrilled to announce Tim Heath, a man who needs little introduction. Tim is the founder of the Yolo Group and general partner at Yolo Investments. Tim is here to share insights on how investors guide companies through introducing corporate policies, investing in people, and setting direction without micromanagement. Tim, welcome to 15-Minute Mastery.
Thanks, Dimma. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Let's go straight to the questions. I think you guys and you personally did a very significant step forward in investing in companies, investing in people. And my first question is about how do you help companies to put the right policies and procedures in place so they can thrive without needing the founder's constant involvement from the investor's points of view?
It's a tough one. I've come from doing this all myself from a long time ago where I sort of discovered everything by myself. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. With the small group of people we started out with trying to work out how to do things, we didn't even know how to spell corporate policy. And it is inhibiting, or it's restricting sort of immediate company growth. But you get to a certain plateau, and if you're still going at this sort of headless chicken way of doing business, the business won't grow and stabilize at the same time. And I suppose the biggest thing is knowing the point where you need to have that corporate policy structure management in place to allow the business to grow methodically. But you can't do it too early because you could spend all of your time trying to build a policy on how you should do it, when actually the first thing you've got to focus on is making your first dollar. And that's just by far the most critical thing. The Yolo Group, and formerly Coin Gaming, it's been around, nearly 10 years now, with a couple of really, really good brands out in the market. We pushed and pushed and pushed, but it's only been in the last couple of years did we think about things like transfer pricing, things like policy management, HR policy management, roadmap development, policy management. And it sounds really ugly sometimes because as an entrepreneur, I'm going, why are we wasting our time doing this? But when you do step back, of which I've stepped back now for the last 3 or 4 years, watching from afar from a supervisory board role, you start to understand how vitally important it really is that the business can succeed you and it can actually grow its own legs and it continually grow. It might not grow at the same rapid rate when you're building and breaking and discovering and failing at the same time, but the business does get to a state where it's got to naturally grow carefully and sensibly, and having a supervisory board that functions and it has its right structure of board meetings and whatnot to help guide those CEOs you've got in place or C-level executives in place so they know how much room they've got, but the direction of where you want to end up is certainly there. What that point is really, really hard to say, but I think the key is to have an open discussion with your investors, with your C-levels you've brought in, with it sort of the board or supervisory board, and almost have that plan 12 months out, 24 months out that, we think we'll be at this stage here. But as a founder, it's really difficult to say, hang on, why am I putting the brakes on? We can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, but you're not the one person doing it all. When you're doing it yourself, you can work your ass off and you can make it happen. But when you're employing 50, 100 or 1,100 people, not everybody works at your level of efficiency or proactiveness or productivity or, commitment and motivation. So it's very hard to have that same level of output coming from a bigger organisation, which therefore means you need to have that structure in place to allow things to grow with maybe a little bit less ambitious goals, but a defensible business which will survive. And if it's an investment, can be sold without you, the founder or the founding team, having any operational control whatsoever. Because you don't want to sell a business of you want to sell a business which can stand on its own 2 feet. But you won't get into a business on its own 2 feet if you're still the person in there answering 50 Telegram messages or 50 Slack messages, making quick decisions. But you won't get the business off the ground if you're trying to have this decision-making process to make simple decisions and people are not sure about what the best direction is because, again, people are a bit scared to take accountability of decision-making process. So there is no exact time for this to happen, but certainly from an investment perspective, there are a number of things can be put in place very early on, sensibly, being corporate structure, being the way money flows, being your transfer pricing, being your legals, being all that. So when that does grow and expand out, that structure is already there.
You mentioned the most important key points every founder needs to hear is probably stepping back from day-to-day operations and trusting their team to run the business, to make the business scalable. And I really wanted to hear your thoughts, like you as the investor or you as the Yolo Group, like how do you advise companies and founders to invest in their people to build like a self-sustainable organization, and how do you support founders to helping them to go back from like day-to-day operations and really trust in their team?
Yeah, look, for many years, I was still whilst I had removed myself from some functions of the business, I still had a very keen interest in the things that I thought I could do really well and could add value. But I actually found the value I added was hopefully pretty good, but it was actually restricting the people I'm employing to come and run that business. So it was actually it did create a friction that I was still the go-to person for a lot of people to have those decisions made. Now, I'd say almost a year ago, I made the decision that, for my life to move forward, I need to absolutely cut all ties with the operations and management of the business, which is a really, really scary thing. I used to always have a say on how the money moved. I don't have that say. I have no access to any bank account or anything anymore, which is a really scary thing, actually, unless you have the right C-levels in place, you have the right board in place, you have the right process and policy in place, bound by that sort of not nearly contractual arrangement, how a board's meant to function, and you almost you put a board in that you trust who will execute on what the shareholders want to happen, and then you absolutely remove yourself. And you get this massive, massive FOMO. But you need to continually remind yourself, the business can function without me. I don't need to be in control of it anymore. And only when you really pull yourself back from that can you'd be amazed then how the business will grow in ways that you've never thought possible, which is almost like a bit of an enlightening moment in the first place to think, you can build a single business yourself, but actually watching that grow, and maybe it won't be as quick as what you've been used to in the previous times, but it's a sustainable long-term plan which can prime your business for sale at the right time. And that's a really, really important part to, sure, you can still have phone calls, you can be a guide, you can be a mentor, you can be an advisor, you can help a handful of people understand what's going on. But as soon as you start jumping over them and answering questions from below that hierarchical structure or corporate structure, that's when you're defeating the purpose of having them in there in the first place. What I've found is those C-levels will actually they'll answer 95% of the questions, but it is the 5% where they say, can I just get your opinion on this? And that's a really satisfying thing to do, be able to say, well, I would do it this way because of X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. But it's almost you're there available for them as opposed to saying this is how it needs to be done. and being at peace with that things won't move as quickly as you've done them before, but it's for a good long-term goal. And it's actually quite satisfying to not have to go to the office any day after you've been doing it for 22 years and to wake up in the morning and go, the business hasn't crashed. The business is actually growing nicely, and there are good reports coming from the CFO, and I get to sit at a board meeting once a quarter and be pleasantly surprised. And that's actually something that's very difficult for an entrepreneur, but maybe it's the next chapter as you move along to understand how that works, to allow these people to really grow and blossom because you've employed them for a reason. So, yeah, it's difficult, but the mindset is very tough as well. But as long as you keep reminding yourself it's for the greater good, then you can become at peace with it and get on with other things in your life as well.
Yeah, I love it. I think you summarized really well some of the signs which which you as the founder and you see the transition from the founder-led company into a more structured corporate entity, how they look like. So I think this is very important, and I think the thing you mentioned about not looking at the funds and not being involved in the funds movement. I had the same word, scary, but I think it's becoming a part of the new norm where you as the founder, start to trust your C-level and your employees more. So I really like it. But the question I had next was more about your new role, right? So your new role, which I think you mentioned this, you switched to a supervisory board in a certain capacity. And I think what's happened with you, like as someone who's been involved in business day to day for such a long time, how your perspective changed, like by looking at the company growth from the inside, being involved on the daily and switching to a more high-level supervisory board role. Can you talk more about it, please?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It goes back to the old, you work at a 40-foot level, a 400-foot level, or that 40,000-foot level, whatever, three different levels of perspective. And when you're in the grind every day, you're grafting away, sometimes it's really hard to put your head above the water and think, where do we want to be in 6 months? Or how does this look from the outside? Say you've made an investment in some marketing thing somewhere, and you're thinking, well, I don't want to lose. I want to have a return on marketing investment of this. But it's really hard to step back and go, hang on, I don't think this is working. Are we doing the right thing? It may have been the greatest idea in the world. It may still be the greatest idea in the world. But sometimes being able to pull the plug on something, and in poker, never put good money after bad. Don't keep chasing the flush draw. When you're in the middle of the hand, it's really hard to go, if only. But you know what? The ifs don't pay the rent in poker. So having that some person who's not daily or monthly involved in the business, who comes in, who may ask the poignant question, why are we doing this? How is that helping Bit Casino or Sportsbet? Is that adding value to Bit Casino or Sportsbet? It may be a super cool idea, and it may be great if it was executed differently. But instead of trying to get in there, is the execution correct, and how could I adjust the execution? Maybe just pulling back and going, is this the right thing to be doing in the first place? And I think when you are not involved in the trenches of running and operating the business, you've now got that really fresh perspective of, I'm not sure if it should be done this way, or that looks fantastic. Should we double down on that? And that's the question from the C-levels going up. Really happy with this. Should we put some more money into that initiative? I was like, yeah, it looks good. So sometimes it's that validation of an idea is good from that 40,000-foot view is the sensible thing to do. Or how does money flow within the business? And again, is the policy set up correctly? But are we leaving enough bankroll to satisfy the action which is needed? And documenting that. And sometimes it feels like, well, it's all in my head. You don't need to do that. But actually, if you are going to remove yourself, the people who run the business need that framework of which to operate within. And I just think you have that clarity from that sort of more distant view of how it's operating. But also, when you're investing in such a wide range of activities within the industry and the ecosystem, you pick up things really quickly on what others are doing well. And that's why you can almost suggest on that supervisory board, I know these guys are doing this in Canada and it's working really well. Have we looked at that? And that just might be because you're spending more time looking at sort of the whole environment rather than just your own environment. You've got a much more clarity in what's going to work and what's not going to work, whether it be from an investment you've made or from not an investment, but you're still interested in how the industry is working. You've got time to breathe to sort of advise a lot more in that sense. So the breadth of knowledge, I'd call it, from the supervisory board.
Yeah, I love it the way you put it. It feels like, your current role is like the paragon of, someone's achievements and someone's understanding of, the niche of the functions, the markets. I think it sits perfectly well for you, and you're all 20 years plus of iGaming experience. I think this conversation has been like a true gem, Tim. I love it. Thank you so much for finding the time for us, and I think many founders and many companies who are going through a very serious transitional period right now will find this very useful. Thank you so much, Tim.
Cheers, mate. Good to always speak to you.